Thanks for tuning in to the Mission Matters podcast, where we feature successful, mission-driven leaders committed to creating a positive change in the world. Our mission with this channel is to inspire other leaders by providing industry insights, new ideas, and inspiring stories from the pros.
Well, hi, Paul Feith here, host of the show where I talk with leaders heading up mission-focused organizations, always leading from the heart, inspiring others, and making a difference in our community. The show, of course, is hosted by PGM, a current B Corporation. To find out what a B Corporation is or what Paul Gregory Media does in the marketing world for nonprofits, visit paulgregorymedia.com. Hi, with me here, Megan Pennington. She is the Advocate Supervisor for CASA of River Valley. She's been there for 6 years now after volunteering for a year. And before that, she was with a nonprofit pediatric cancer foundation for 4 years. Is that right, Megan? 4 years?
Yes. Good morning, Paul. Thank you for having me on your show.
Yeah. Thank you for being here. Why don't you tell our listeners a little about yourself and what led you to CASA of River Valley?
Right. Absolutely. So you're right. Before I started working for CASA, I actually worked for a pediatric cancer nonprofit foundation. And during that time, I'd heard about CASA. We have a very large fundraiser, our Christmas Express train ride. And I'd actually taken my children when they were younger on the train ride, but that had pretty much been my only exposure to CASA and the work they do. I did know they worked with children in the foster care system at that time in Will County. We've since expanded to Grundy County. In 2016, though, I was actually on a mission trip to it's now called Eswatini, but it was at the time Swaziland in Africa with my church. And we were working with a orphanage there. And it really, really struck my heart thinking, I'm in this different continent working with children when there are children in my own backyard, literally, that need people to serve them and to advocate for them. And so I came back from the trip and I knew CASA was an organization that really worked with kids in the community, trying to help them. And I signed up to volunteer, started volunteering a few months later. And then about after a year, they offered me a position on staff as an advocate supervisor. And I've been there ever since.
Wow. So a story overseas inspired you to volunteer right here at home.
Right. Absolutely. I just knew that, I sure could go to Africa and serve on a mission trip, once, every few years. But what could I do in my local community to help? And CASA was, where I felt drawn to.
Yeah. And you'd mentioned it's important to note that it used to be CASA of Will County and it's now CASA of River Valley because it serves multiple counties.
Correct. That is correct. So we established CASA of Will County in 1993. And in January of 2000, shortly before the COVID-19 pandemic began, 2020, not 2000, January 2020, we also branched out to Grundy County as well. So we are now CASA of River Valley, incorporating both of those counties.
Since 1993, I don't think I knew that.
Yes. So we've been around for a while, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. So let's just go right into it then. So what is CASA?
So CASA stands for Court Appointed Special Advocate. So we are a team of mostly volunteers that serve children in the foster care system in Will and Grundy County. I'm staff that oversees the cases that these volunteers work with, along with many of the other coworkers that I have. So what is a court appointed special advocate? When a child enters the foster care system, they're assigned a guardian ad litem. Typically, that's a public defender through the court system. I'm sure, you've heard multiple times, the court system is completely overlogged and overwhelmed. So if a children is assigned a public defender as their guardian ad litem, they're lucky if they maybe get to see that public defender once or twice a year. They have too many kids on their caseload. If they're able to be assigned a CASA as their advocate, as their guardian ad litem, they are guaranteed to have somebody that is visiting them on a monthly basis, that is checking up on them, checking up on their families, and really looking out for their best interest. One of the best ways CASA is described is the eyes and ears to the judge, so we can report how that child is doing and what is going on in their lives.
So this is done through volunteers, I'm guessing, right?
Yes. So our advocates are volunteers. We currently have approximately, I want to say, between 115 and 120 volunteers serving children throughout Will and Grundy counties.
And their role is to go to the homes of these children?
So our volunteers typically visit with the children once a month for a minimum of 1 hour. Now, what I can tell you are most of these volunteers develop really strong bonds with the kids that they work with. And during their visits, we ask for a minimum of an hour, but they can stay there and spend as much time with them. And our volunteers don't just go out there and like a caseworker would and just check and see how they're doing. I can tell you, I myself serve a couple of cases, and we go out there and we're baking, we're playing softball, we're doing puzzles. I can't tell you the one time how much fun I had playing Mario Kart with one of the kids on my caseload. So our volunteers are really just establishing bonds with the kids that they serve. They're not just another cog in the wheel, because I'm sure, as you know, when a child enters the foster care system, there is a revolving door of people coming in and out of their lives. They are constantly, there's a very high turnover in terms of caseworkers. There might be a high turnover in foster placements. If they're actually placed out of the home, they might be moving from foster home to foster home, getting a new caseworker every couple of months. And so what's nice is if they have a CASA serving them, this could be their one constant in their life throughout the time that they are in the foster care system. We do ask our volunteers to typically serve for a minimum of 2 years, which is usually about the average time a case is open from start to finish. And that's just so that we can maintain that consistency for the child and, have it be in their best interest to have somebody that's a regular presence in their life.
Wow.
I actually was communicating with one of my volunteers today. I'm writing a profile on for our annual report. She's actually on her 4th case right now, but she was telling me about her very first case, that even when the case closed, she's still maintained a relationship with that girl. That girl has told her she wants her to be at her wedding. It was a really heartwarming story.
Wow. Wow, that's interesting, because you wonder if there should be professional boundaries between the CASA representative and the family, but it sounds like there's some strong bonds being.
There are strong bonds, but we do have professional boundaries. I mean, for example, our CASAs, they are not allowed to drive children or, take children out on their own. Most of our visits are usually, at the home, or maybe at a park. We'll take a walk to the park down the street, or we'll meet up at a McDonald's and the foster parent or caregiver will be sitting at another table nearby. And our advocates, once a case closes, they're not required to maintain contact with the children that they serve. But a lot of them have just developed such a close relationship that they become almost more like a family friend at that time.
Sure. And do these advocates also represent the children at the courts as well?
Yes. So our advocates are not required to come to court. As an advocate supervisor, one of our roles we are present daily in court, presenting our cases before the judge. We also have an attorney that works with CASA. But what our advocates do is they write a report to the judge before each court hearing, giving them an update on the child, the parents, and how the case is going. But our advocates are always welcome to come to the court hearings to be there. They're not required to. We understand that a lot of our advocates have jobs and it just doesn't fit with their schedule. And we want to, honor that.
Sure. And you mentioned just a moment ago, 120 volunteers?
We do. We have about 120 volunteers, which you would think that sounds like a lot and we can reach a lot of kids. Unfortunately, with about 375 kids in Will County alone that we were serving, we are only meeting the needs of about 60% of the children in Will County. Prior to COVID starting in 2020, we were serving up to, I want to say, almost close to 85% of the kids in Will County. And our goal was to serve 100% of the children there. Since that time, I'm sure, you're aware of the state of the world over the last couple of years. And the number of children in care has increased so much that we're now only serving 60% of the kids that are in the foster care system. And that means that there are 40% of those kids that are in the foster care system in Will County that do not have an advocate serving them. The only person they have as their guardian ad litem is a public defender.
Right. So there's unmet needs there at about 40%.
Absolutely.
Okay. So there's a need there for volunteers.
And if we could, we would take on all the children. And I can tell you, most of our, or not most of ours, but we do have advocates that are so invested in their work in CASA that they have taken on multiple cases just so they can help other children.
Sure. Well,
because they know the need is so
problem, right?
great.
You have 120 volunteers serving 300 and some odd kids. You got 2 to 3 families that each advocate it could be serving. So that's the need that you guys find yourselves in with this growing need, which we were talking about before we started recording. After the pandemic, there's let's just talk about this, right? The huge mental health crisis that's going on right now, because that's factoring into this, right?
Well, right. And Paul, it's not only just mental health. There's increased rates of substance abuse. There's increased rates of domestic violence. With the fluctuations in the economy over the last couple of years, 96% of the families that we work with are considered low poverty or high poverty. So there's a whole, range of influences that are affecting why these children have ended up in the care of the state.
Wow. And that brings up another issue, right? Because substance abuse, the economy, which is poverty, which are they able to buy food? And do they need food assistance? Education, there's a whole range of issues that you're talking about now, in addition to just the mental health crisis. I got to imagine that CASA of River Valley is partnering with other agencies out there to meet the needs of these families.
We do. We are in frequent communication with, well, first of all, when a child comes into care, usually DCFS contracts out through private agencies. And so they are assigned a caseworker either through DCFS or through this private agency. As a CASA volunteer, or as my role as an advocate supervisor, we're in regular communication with those agencies to make sure that the children's needs are being met. When a parent or when a child comes into care, their parent is typically referred for a number of services, whether it's a psychological assessment, individual counseling, substance treatment, domestic violence treatment. So we're in regular contact with those service providers too, to make sure the parents are, fulfilling the services that they're required to do. With the children themselves, if they are in a foster home, we're in regular communication with the foster parent. We also regularly communicate with their schools. A lot of the kids require IEPs or 504s. So a lot of our CASA advocates will sit in on those meetings. We know a lot of the kids that we work with, they are in need of either special services such as speech or physical therapy, individual counseling. So our CASA advocates are regularly in communication with those providers as well. And going back to that mental health crisis that we talked about, one of the other nice things about these children is that, in terms of mental health or, even just early intervention services, the wait lists for these services are astronomical at times. And so I can tell you just myself personally, I have multiple children on my caseload that have been on these wait lists for, individual counseling or other type of services. And we're able to keep on top of that. We're able to make sure that these kids aren't just going to languish on a wait list for months. We're going to try and get them the help that they need to be able to thrive in whatever environment they're in, whether they're at home with their parents or they're in, a separate foster care placement.
Yeah, it almost sounds like those other social services are having that same problem with volunteers and staffing.
It's across the board. And, when I say that these children are languishing on wait lists, it's not for lack of people doing their job. It's because everybody is overworked and there's just too many people in need of services.
Yeah.
And there's just not enough providers.
Yeah, I'm seeing that theme a lot more and more lately, as all these organizations are seeing it too. So I love the notion of these advocates and what they do. And you said yourself, you're taking on a few cases as well as a supervisor. I'm wondering in your leadership role, what does success for one of these families look like to you?
So the goal in Illinois is reunification with the biological parents. So that is the ultimate success story, is for a child to be reunified with their parents, their home of origin. That's for the parents to successfully complete the services that they have been referred for and to have their child returned home to them, to that family unit. Unfortunately, sometimes that does not happen. And so our next really main goal is to see the child thriving in a forever home, whether that is guardianship or adoption by a relative or a family friend, or even a completely separate, non-relative foster family.
Okay.
But really that success goal is to just see that child thriving and for them to get the help that they need, whether it's academically, emotionally, physically, that they're getting the help that they need and that they're able to find that forever home, whether it's being returned back to their family of origin or with a separate adoptive family.
Sure. But going from whatever state that they were in to now thriving, I could see where those bonds start to develop with the advocate, because that journey alone is very personal and very, I don't want to say traumatic. It might have been traumatic in the beginning, but very positive force in their life.
Well, and I think that's a great way to describe that, Paul. And I think that's why we have so many of our CASA advocates stay on beyond their initial case. Most of our CASA advocates they're so wonderful. Our program, we couldn't do what we do without them. And they're so dedicated to the work that they're doing and the children that they're serving, that when a case does close, whether again, a family is reunified together, parents and children, or they're moved into adoptive placement, most of our advocates are willing to take on another case right away because they see the impact that they're making. They see the impact and the positive presence that they're able to provide a child through times of turmoil and the worst times in their life. I mean, trauma has such an impact on children, even from in utero. And it's in those early formative years, especially, where these children, could end up with lifelong problems, whether it's physical health problems, emotional problems, intellectual problems, and being able to help these kids get the help that they need is so rewarding. Because you're really not just helping them during this time, you're setting them up for success in the future as well.
Yeah, long-term success.
Correct.
Awesome. Well, I think you've said it all. Thanks for sharing what CASA does and the success stories with our listeners. Because it's part of a leadership series, I always like to ask at least one or two questions about leadership style and what you've learned. So you've been doing this for 6 years, and before that, 4 years with the Pediatric Cancer Foundation. Any tips or styles that you could share in your leadership style that you find helps you get through your day?
Absolutely. So my job really relies a lot on multitasking. In addition to managing, my advocates' cases, I have several cases of my own that I work with. I also do different media and community promotions, such as this podcast or other videos, and I write grants. So I'm juggling a lot of balls, and I really have to stay very organized. So a couple of things that have really helped me, I'm not going to lie, I work remotely a lot of the time, and having that time to myself, that quiet space, really helps me be able to just knock out hours upon hours of work at one time. But I also live and die by the Google Calendar on my phone, and also my paper calendar, where I have, in addition to the Google Calendar, meetings written, court dates written, when I have reports due, when my advocates need to get me those reports so I can edit them. I'm also a big to-do list. Every day at the beginning of the week, I sit down and I write what my major to-do lists are for my casework and grants and whatnot that week, what deadlines I have. And then I review that every morning and kind of add to it or subtract. I get a lot of satisfaction crossing something off my to-do list. But there's no way, without being organized, there's no way that I could juggle all the different things. And especially with the casework, I mentioned there are so many different service providers and people that we're in regular communication with and things that we have to kind of follow up on. So I definitely have to kind of stay organized with that.
So organization and time management. And you had me with the Google Calendar because it's my absolute favorite tool.
Yes.
But then you kind of went old school on me with the paper.
Yeah, you know what? It is just last year that I got rid of a regular paper planner for my day-to-day as well, and transitioned over to the Google Calendar. And I'll be honest with you, I had to do it with my husband because we had too many separate things with our kids going on that he had to be apprised of in terms of driving. But I have definitely. I really like the Google Calendar, but I'm old school. I can't get rid of the writing things down. It's really helped me, and I've been doing it for years on end. And it's just
hey, it's been working for you, so why?
It is. It is absolutely
awesome. Well, I want to just thank you again for joining us on the podcast. Any parting thoughts, maybe, for our guests?
I just want to say, if you are listening and you think it is something that could be in your wheelhouse, or you have the capacity to serve, please check out our website and learn about how to become a volunteer. I know the work that I talked about might sound kind of overwhelming, but I will say a majority of our volunteers, they're not just retirees. They are people that are working full time. They have families. We have a 2-week training that's required in the beginning to become a volunteer. But after that, we really only require, between 4 to 5 hours a month, only one of which is usually supposed to be your visit. The rest might be, making a couple phone calls or sending emails, communicating with your advocate supervisor on the case. It's really a doable thing. Like I said, when I started as a volunteer, I had 2 kids in school. I was working as at the Pediatric Cancer Foundation. And like I said, most of my volunteers actually do work too. But if you're really looking for something fulfilling, a way to serve your community and to really invest in, the youth and local families in your community, I can't recommend enough checking out CASA. It's really, really rewarding.
Yes. Be sure to check out CASA, or it's CASA. It's not CASA. It's CASA.
Yes,
my Jersey accent. I don't know. CASA of River Valley, right? .org.
Correct. Yes, CASAofRiverValley.org. And we have a whole section on there on how to become a volunteer.
Yep, volunteers right on the main navigation, and from there you can begin your journey. You can learn what the requirements are. You can fill out an application, and so it's all right there. So, and I like the idea because I kind of assumed that it was more retirees with time on their hands, but because with one family and you got to do like a 1 hour or more visit a month, it really seems doable.
It really is.
And then you, on your flex time, whenever you have time, you write the report. Have email communication or a phone call with your supervisor, and you're on your way. So it's really.
And I will tell you, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I will tell you, as an advocate supervisor too, those of us that are on staff with CASA, we 100% recognize that our advocates are in a volunteer role. So a large portion of my day is helping the advocates make those follow-ups, send those emails, touch base on services, because we understand that they're a volunteer position and this is our job. So we're in regular communication with our advocates and more than willing to always help them, to step in and to help them. What we really want them to focus on is their time with the child, and, all the extraneous things we're more than happy to help with.
So they're getting a lot of support from people in your position.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Great to go. Well, thanks again. I really appreciate learning more about CASA of River Valley. And this is just true with CASA all over, right? Because there's so many, there's one in every county, not every county, but there's one in a lot of different counties, right?
Yes. Yeah. CASA is a national organization. So there are a lot of different counties in Illinois that have a local CASA organization.
Good to know. Okay. All right. Well, thanks, Megan. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me on. I really appreciate the chance to talk about CASA. I'm really passionate about the work that we do.
It shows. Thank you.
Thanks.
Until next time, everyone.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Mission Matters podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.